Mary Frances Early, you have been helping to build the beloved community, to build a truly multiracial democracy in America, to make our country, to make our world, and to make the University of Georgia, the state of Georgia, and our region a better place.
I have two wishes for you. I wish you graduates roots and wings. Roots so that you never forget where you started. Never forget the sacrifices made by family and friends so that you could succeed in your quest for knowledge. Never forget the history of this proud university.
When the class of 2007 at the University of Georgia's Graduate School heard from the commencement speaker, few realized it was a moment in time that closed a circle. The unpretentious woman at the podium was a retired schoolteacher, music educator, and a trailblazer in the struggle to desegregate the state's premier public university. Mary Frances Early was an unlikely candidate to challenge the status quo of racial segregation that was a way of life in the South, a status that was being questioned by a new generation of grassroots activists.
Because I'd grown up in Atlanta and I'd seen for instance, when I wanted to go to the Fox, we had to go on the outside and climb up innumerable steps in order to get to the uppermost seats, and this is where blacks sat. We couldn't go to the symphony, although I was very interested in music. We couldn't go to the symphony or any of the other programs that were going on here in Atlanta, because Atlanta has always been a cultural mecca. I knew that I couldn't go and drink water from the water fountains at San White. I remember once being on a bus with my mother. My mother was very fair, and she looked very Caucasian. And the bus driver got up and came back and said, "You'll have to move. You can't sit with this white lady." And I said, "That's my mother." And things like that, just, I guess, after a while, you think about these things and you know that it's your responsibility as much as anyone else to stop this. It was nonsense. It didn't make sense.
Early was born and raised in Atlanta. Like other blacks in the South, she was introduced to Jim Crow at an early age.
Well, my first remembrance is that my dad had a restaurant on Auburn Avenue. And my brother and I were in school at E.P. Johnson, which was in the neighborhood in southeast Atlanta. And we had to be on the morning session, because they had two sessions, morning and afternoon. And all of us had to go over to the restaurant because my mom was one of the cooks. And there was a library across the street, the only library that blacks could use, the Auburn Branch Library.
That routine opened up more than books for her.
I stayed at the library, and that was my refuge. I read probably a lot of things I shouldn't have read, but I had time because I could do my homework and read. I lost myself in other worlds by using that library.
That love of learning was inspired by her mother, who had been a teacher in a one-room public schoolhouse in her hometown of Monroe, Georgia. Early's father, who was a singer in his own right, led her to take music lessons at a young age.
He wanted me to be able to accompany him. So there was a piano teacher studio upstairs from the restaurant, same building, Odd Fellows building actually. And Professor Byron was the professor. So I started taking piano when I was 8. And I liked it. I mean, it was so interesting. I learned how to read music, but Professor Byron would rap me on the knuckles with a pencil when I made a mistake.
Early's family were members of the Mount Vernon Baptist Church in Atlanta, where she played the piano for the Sunday school and the church choir. Early carried the twin passions for learning and music with her throughout her school years.
Yeah, oh yeah, she was the real deal.
Lonnie King was a classmate for 3 years in elementary school.
She would know the answer to any. I never saw her not know the answer to a question that was raised by the teacher, all the way. Because I was in the 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade with her. She was quiet. It's as simple as that. A quiet, brilliant woman.
After my dad died when I was 12 and John was 13, we had to go to Washington High School because it was in our district. I wanted to be in the band because I had wanted to be in the band since I was in elementary school. And E.P. Johnson didn't have enough money to hire an itinerant band teacher. So I had to play in a rhythm band, and I thought that's too juvenile. But anyway, I had always wanted to play in a band. And when I went to Washington High School, I talked with Mr. Earl Starling, the band director. He wanted me to play a tuba. And I said, no, I don't want that, that's too big. I want to play clarinet.
Timing was on her side. A new school, Turner High, was just about to open.
Turner opened, and it was another world. You have to understand, when we were in school, particularly elementary school, and then even high school at Washington, we had no new textbooks. They were all used books, and they had the name of the white school printed in the front. Many times pages were torn, things were scratched in, and I just wanted a new textbook. But at any rate, we had new textbooks. We had a brand new school.
Excelling in academics and music in 1953, Early graduated as class valedictorian of Turner High School.
Because, as my parents said, education is the key. If you want to be successful in life, you must have a good education.
From what I know of her, she had dedicated parents who wanted to make sure that she had the tools necessary to survive in this racist world.
Lonnie King's family, like Early's, shared a common dream for their children.
As I look at that generation, that was our parents of that time. They were the children of people who were the first blacks out of slavery, first generation out of slavery. And I think that they were more concerned with what kind of future we were going to have without education. And so they made sure that if we had the ability, those parents to a great extent kept our feet to the fire.
That influence eventually sent them on divergent paths to the front lines of the battle for social justice, Early in the classroom and King on the streets.
I was a nerd. And, it was okay. I loved studying. I liked the teachers. I liked the challenges. And there were challenges, but I wasn't a wild child.
While Early was cerebral, Lonnie King, who had enrolled at Morehouse, was catapulted into direct action as founder of the Atlanta student movement of the 1960s. This drew him into a strong alliance with another native Atlantan, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. While some students engaged in direct action on the streets, Early continued her low-key journey through college and the career path expected of a black woman with a college degree in that era.
I can't march on the picket line, but I can go to school.
Early attended Clark College in Atlanta, where she stood out as a music major, singing in the chorus and even becoming student conductor of the renowned Clark College Marching Band. Though quiet and reserved, Early joined the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority and participated in a number of extracurricular activities. In 1957, Early graduated yet again as valedictorian from Clark College. Early then began what would become a long teaching career in the Atlanta public school system. After 1 year of teaching at John Hope School, Early desired to earn a master's degree close to home. But unlike her white counterparts, she was barred by law and Board of Regents policies from attending the University of Georgia. So like many other blacks in the South, she was relegated to seeking a graduate degree from out of state, a move that was financed by an educational form of apartheid, the out-of-state scholarship for Negroes.
That was a ploy to keep us from wanting to go to the state university or any white university or white school.
Though state segregation laws blocked Early's admission to UGA, she was welcomed by the top-ranked University of Michigan. She took classes during her summer breaks and returned to Georgia to teach in the fall. As fate would have it, one historic event changed everything. The federal court injunction barring the University of Georgia from denying admission to blacks because of race. It all came to a boiling point when federal judge William Boodle ordered the University of Georgia to admit its first two black students, Hamilton Holmes and Charlayne Hunter. Their arrival at the university triggered a visceral reaction and anger, culminating in mob action and a night of rioting on the University of Georgia campus.
When I saw the televised version of the riot that was going on here, and the next morning saw the newspaper with an article and a picture of Charlayne holding a Madonna and Hamilton looking very sad in a car being driven back to Atlanta, I said, they can't do that. These are my fellow Turnerites, and they should have been able to protect them.
I saw those two young people and felt that I needed to join the struggle and do what I could to help end the segregation that was so prevalent in the South.
Hamilton Holmes and Charlayne Hunter were handpicked and groomed by Atlanta's black elite to desegregate the University of Georgia. Holmes, the son of a prominent civil rights family, and Hunter, whose mother was employed by the black-owned Atlanta Life Insurance Company, were two exceptional candidates with superior academic and social skills. Holmes and Hunter were not strangers to Early.
I, of course, knew both of them because they had attended Turner. They were after me, but I knew them because I did my student teaching at Turner.
The eruption of violence did not come as a surprise to her.
In Atlanta at that time, it was a boiling cauldron of protest. There were picketing going on. There were sit-ins. And I wanted to do something. I mean, this had been building, as I told you, it had been building in me. We must get out of this system of segregation. And you know, we were living in a city, they said, that was too busy to hate. But that wasn't what I observed. And I was tired of the demeaning system of segregation.
Instead of reacting with anger, Early made a crucial, life-altering decision to act.
The third day after the riot, because I think it happened on a weekend, I wrote and asked for an application. I got the application back in a couple of days. I couldn't believe it.
That was the first and only time the University of Georgia responded to her promptly. The university then proceeded to erect a bureaucratic blockade to delay and derail her application.
So when the University of Georgia received my transcripts, I think they realized that I was black. And that's when all of the things began. That is, a long wait when I heard nothing.
The University of Georgia took the unusual step of demanding her high school transcripts. Unable to reject her application on academic grounds, the university used police agencies to investigate her personal background and the background of her family. Agents looked for evidence of venereal disease in her family, whether she had given birth to an illegitimate child, or even if she had worked as a prostitute.
They were trying to smear her character. They were looking for dirt. Anything they could look for to disqualify her on a moral turpitude kind of way.
The university also refused to schedule a mandatory interview. However, Early took the offensive and informed the registrar, Walter Danner, when she would arrive for the face-to-face interview. It was a meeting that became a test of her resolve. Instead of discussing her academic skills, the interview was based on slanderous assertions from the secret police file.
I was asked if I'd ever been in a house of prostitution, and I looked at Mr. Danner and I said, of course not. I'm a professional. I'm a teacher. I have no need or interest in houses of prostitution. But I thought he was trying to goad me, to make me maybe react in a disrespectful way, and I kept my cool, but I was so angry.
After 5 months of intense scrutiny and fearful of a possible contempt charge for violating the federal injunction, the University of Georgia relented and reluctantly admitted Early. But the indignities persisted. Although a graduate student, she was assigned to a room in Center Myers Hall, which traditionally housed freshmen.
You have been assigned to the first floor in Center Myers dormitory. Registration is on June 12th for the first session and July 24th for the second session. The dormitories open at 10 a.m. the day preceding registration. All dormitory rooms are furnished with single beds, dressers, tables, chairs, and shades. You are expected to furnish bed linen, blankets, pillow, bedspread, towels, and dresser scarf. We are looking forward to having you at the University of Georgia.
It was the same dormitory room that had been assigned to Charlene Hunter, the only other black student who had lived on campus.
This was a counselor's suite, and then I think it was occupied by one of the sororities. But at any rate, they made that room the room for Charlene, and it was a room that had an adjoining room, and there was a small kitchenette, and a bathroom, because they wanted us to be separate from all of the other students. We didn't have to use the same restroom facilities, and they hoped that we would use the kitchen instead of going to the dining hall, but neither one of us did. I didn't come down here to cook.
It was not only a hostile environment, isolated on the first floor, it was also dangerous.
I looked at that room and I thought, this is dangerous. Why would they put her in a room that's right on the street, that's vulnerable to rocks or bums or whatever?
In fact, the window had been shattered by rioters during Charlene Hunter's second night on campus. Although socially and physically isolated from other students in the dorm, Early reluctantly accepted the situation. Routine events like registering for class became a potential flashpoint. Early does recall a friendly student ally.
We went to breakfast and then met Mae March, and she and I went to register. It was in the big gymnasium, and I remember there were lines, just long, long lines. A lot of people looked at us, stared at us, and I think I was very glad after I had decided that I would go with her. I accepted her kind invitation. It might have been worse had I not had another student with me. So I wrote in my diary and sent my diary to Dr. Holman, Carl Holman, who was the editor of the newspaper. And I described that first day in that article and got some repercussions from it because I described my professors that I met. And the only thing I had to say about the registration process was that it was long and it was hot in the gym and that people were staring. No one said anything.
The silence became a psychological knife that became sharper on a daily basis. Even taking an exam was a test of her resolve.
And when I went into the auditorium, I sat down near the end of a row. And everybody on that row, though I was not sitting close to anyone, got up and moved. And psychologically, that just really rattled me. And I thought, for a very important exam, if I failed this exam, they could, I guess, put me out. And I've just gotten here. I had to really, really focus to push that to the back of my mind.
She was also denied the social experiences of university life.
It wasn't like going to University of Michigan where, you know, you were carefree, you talked to classmates, you walked and had pizza and Coke. There was none of that. There was nowhere to go.
Athens, in comparison, was a small southern town in North Georgia. The university was its major claim to fame. Like similar towns around the South, it was controlled by the whites who dominated government, education, and the economy. Black people were only 25% of the population in 1960, even though their community had roots going back to the antebellum era. Early did find refuge at a local black-owned restaurant, operated by the Killian family. Led by patriarch Archibald Killian, a local civil rights leader, the Killian restaurant was a place where civil rights leaders congregated. It was one of the few places where Early experienced simple human dignity.
The Killian family was, they were a breath of fresh air. I went there to get not only soul food, but to have somebody to talk with when I ate. Because when I went to the Snelling dining hall, if I sat at a table where there was an empty place, they'd get up and leave. I mean, there was no one to eat with. And once when I went, they were throwing lemon wedges at me from the iced tea glasses. And they didn't stop until one landed into one of the serving trays.
Early's support network also included Dr. J. Arthur Kelly, a black dentist and civil rights activist in Athens.
He invited me to come to his office the first day when I registered, to meet a white student, art student, who was going to accompany me to the registration. And I went and saw him many times while I was here. In fact, my graduation gift was he was giving me some fillings as a dentist would. And I still have that note from him. Plus, he was a music person himself. He was a composer. And he gave me a piece of music that he had written called Follow Your Heart, which I still have, but he was wonderful. I was on the campus for the third day. That was my 25th birthday. And a surprise birthday party was given for me, though I didn't know it, at the Presbyterian Student Center across from Center Myers. That came about as an invitation. Do you want to come over and have hot dogs and buns and chips? And I said, well, yeah, you know, it was my birthday. But when I got over there, I found that it was a surprise birthday party. That was the most special birthday I have ever had, because I felt these people don't know me and they're being kind.
While Early was shunned for the most part, a few whites on campus courageously reached out to her. Key support came from the Westminster House, a campus ministry of the Presbyterian Church.
She first met a lady named Mae March, and her story is that she ran into this graduate student while she was registering, so they just stuck together and went through registration together for the summertime that Mary Frances had come over to start at the University of Georgia. Mae March was a good member of Westminster House and the little group we call Westminster Fellowship. And every Sunday evening, we always had a meal together. And Mae learned that Mary Frances was having her 24th birthday that Sunday.
Hardin Corky King was a minister assigned to the campus ministry, and the Sunday gathering was a routine event for him.
The word got around quickly, and so my wife Mary Lyle baked a cake, and a faculty member named Jim Popovich showed up with ice cream, and in addition to whatever the meal was, Mary Frances says it was a hot dog. I suppose it was. I don't remember what it. But we had a birthday cake in her honor, celebrating her birthday, and that kind of blew her away because she was being so isolated, and it made a big impression on her.
That proved to be a rare event, as the seething anger on campus escalated into acts of terror, and there were some tension-filled face-to-face confrontations.
I was going to the library one evening, and it was in the evening, and it was dark, and it was a beautiful night. And these guys were spread across the steps at the library, and as I approached, one of them said, "I smell a dog," and the other one said, "No, that's not a dog, that's a nigger." And they just sort of just banded there, and I just went like a bulldog. And there were some guys across the street, and they started throwing little pebbles. They weren't big rocks, they were little pebbles. And a couple of them hit me. So I picked up one that was rather much larger, and I threw it back. I didn't throw to hit them, but I said, "I'm not that nonviolent."
Her visceral response was opposite the philosophy of nonviolence preached by her friend and mentor, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at Ebenezer Baptist Church.
But when I went home the next weekend, I stopped after service and in Dr. King's office and asked if I could speak with him, and I did. And I told him what I'd done. I said, "You know, I have erred because I have not been nonviolent." And I told him what happened. And he said, "Don't worry, Mary Frances, I would have done the same thing."
While Early endured taunts and threats to her physical safety, supporters like Corky King also felt the backlash.
When you talk about the desegregation of the University of Georgia, or the integration of the University of Georgia, whichever way you want to say that, you were talking roughly about 12 to 15 years, and you were talking about 3 individuals who were campus pastors at Westminster House, one right after the other. Bill Rogers first, then myself, then a guy named Roland Perdue. We all provided all the leadership we could, and the community each time for each of the 3 of us got a little uncomfortable. We were a bit too active in the social or political or civil rights scene, whatever scene they wanted. We were too much. And so consequently, each of us, in different ways, got little encouragements to move along after a period of time. I think I'm the only one whose contract was actually terminated, but we all 3 were encouraged to move on. They had had all they could do.
Meanwhile, the university continued to isolate and alienate Early.
We were getting ready for concert, and like anyone else, I wanted to invite my mother down for the concert. And I must have mentioned it to the choral director, I'm not sure. But I got a message asking me to come to Dean Williams' office, and I didn't know what it was about. When I was able to get in, he told me that I should not invite my mother because the campus was really integrated just for students, not for other blacks. That bothered me.
Refusing to let circumstances derail her, Early continued her studies, even taking time off from her teaching job in the spring of 1962 to resume her coursework at UGA. Besides the support from the Killian family and the Westminster House, she was buoyed by the support from friends and colleagues in Atlanta who literally passed the hat.
But when I decided that I would go back for the spring quarter and the following summer, I had no idea how I was going to do it. So Mr. Hill, once again, came to my rescue and said, "Look, we've got to get some help for you, because financially it's going to be tough. You won't have a salary, and you won't have insurance or health care, any of that." And he talked with Dr. Tate, who was the executive secretary of the Black Professional Organization for Teachers here in Atlanta. And Dr. Tate talked with the state person, and they wrote a letter asking teachers to contribute $1 or $2 toward this cause for Mary Frances Early so that she could get her degree, because it would open up opportunities for black teachers to go to University of Georgia. And I was amazed. Just before I went back for the spring quarter of '62, I had over $2,000. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but in those days, it was a lot, because I could pay my tuition and room and board, and have a little left over for other things like books.
Financially secure, Early finished her coursework and looked forward to graduation. But this process took a personal toll on Early, who started smoking to try to reduce the stress. The ever-present threat of danger also impacted her relationship with her extended family.
I have family that lives in Monroe, but when I was here, I would not, my mother's from Monroe, and her brothers and sisters were here. I did not stop on the way to Atlanta or back to Athens because they lived there. I did not want anything that might happen because of my being at the University of Georgia to happen to them.
By this time, a handful of black students also had enrolled at the University of Georgia. But racism threatened to spoil her commencement exercise that summer. Although the university had discouraged her family and friends from participating in university events, Early was determined to have them attend her commencement ceremony.
So for graduation, I didn't ask permission. I just invited my church members, my family, of course, my friends, and I think there was 74 people in all. I stopped counting at one point. I had them written down, but some names I still have, but others I don't. They came. It was the first time that many blacks had been in a commencement exercise, I'm sure. And I was in line with all of the music graduates, and nobody talked to me, nobody said anything. Nobody spoke to me.
Armed now with a master's degree, she returned to teaching full-time, giving her heart and soul to her students. While many would have wanted to stay away from the challenges she endured at the University of Georgia, Early chose to go back 2 years later to earn a second degree. Lance Jackson was a student of Early's at Cohen Middle School in Atlanta, where she ignited his passion for music.
It was a great time. I learned guitar, and I still play. But I started on guitar with her, but the organ was my love, and she knew it. She came along in an era where if the teacher saw something in you, they actively nurtured that, She may not have had any children, but if any of the rest of them feel as I do, she was like another mother to us.
One that recognized his extraordinary talent as a musician, so much so that his own family took notice.
And she must have had a talk with my parents and let them know, that I was just really, really into playing the organ, because around my 13th birthday, 1972, I'm outside playing with my siblings, and a truck pulls up in front of our house, and they start unloading an organ off the truck. And I'm stunned. My mother peeks out the back door and notices me. I'm just standing there frozen. She goes, "That's for you." And it was the happiest day of my life.
That started him on a career path as a professional organist and composer. Betty Williford, like Early, was a music teacher in the public schools. Although Jim Crow policies did not allow them to teach in the same schools in the 1960s, their passion for music eventually brought them together as close friends.
Well, I first read about her before I ever met her. I was reading in the newspaper that a music teacher in the Atlanta Public Schools had received a degree at the University of Georgia, and she was the first African American, and so, but I didn't know her at the time, even though we were in schools that were not too far apart, but the faculties were not integrated at that time. Although soon they were, but they were not integrated at that time.
Over the course of a 37-year career with the Atlanta Public Schools, Early rose through the ranks as a mid-level supervisor and eventually led the music program for the entire system. After retiring from the Atlanta Public School System as director of music, she joined the faculty at Morehouse and Spelman colleges. She ultimately rose to become chair of the music department at her alma mater, now Clark Atlanta University, all the while never being acknowledged nor recognized as UGA's first black graduate.
If it had not been for Dr. Daniels, I wouldn't be known on this campus. And I say at the lecture almost every year, I wouldn't be here, folk, if it weren't for Dr. Daniels, because he unearthed information, and I'm sure he's a wonderful researcher. He went beyond talking with Don Hollowell and Mr. Hill. He actually did some research and found that it was true.
It is indeed fitting and proper that we celebrate and honor this pioneer, this trailblazer, and ultimately this bridge builder. Recognizing such an unheralded American freedom fighter enhances our appreciation of the challenges and struggles faced by ordinary citizens who did extraordinary things. Thank you, Mary Frances Early, for helping to make justice and democracy and freedom more of a reality for all citizens in these United States.
That is Maurice Daniels, a civil rights scholar and the first black dean of the School of Social Work at the University of Georgia. He literally reunited Early with the school. During the 1990s, while doing research on the history of the desegregation of UGA, he learned details of Mary Frances Early's struggle to gain admission. The revelations came during Daniels' interviews with civil rights leaders Donald Hollowell, Jesse Hill, and Vernon Jordan.
She came as a graduate student to the university, did very well, and was actually the first black to get a degree because she got her master's degree before Hemp and Charlene were able to finish. But she's a pioneer too. She just she was not involved in the lawsuit and therefore did not share in the celebrity. That makes her no less a celebrity in my judgment.
And her admission to the graduate school was almost uneventful in a sense, although after she got there, there were incidents, she would call me, and things went well for her. Right. And she really was the first black to graduate from the University of Georgia.
Jesse Hill and Donald Hollowell, who had led the group of black leaders in crafting the strategy to desegregate the University of Georgia, played a pivotal role in helping Early overcome barriers to her enrollment. For those who were close to the events at the time, when Hamilton Holmes and Charlene Hunter enrolled as the first black undergraduate students, the clarification is a pivotal moment in the history of the University of Georgia.
The narrative has been that she and Hamilton were the first ones to integrate the school, and that's true. They were the first ones. But the first one to graduate was Early. And if it were not for Dr. Daniels, I think that would she'd just be lost in history. And it took Maurice Daniels, in my opinion, to lift her out of, I guess you would say, the bowels of insignificance to put her where I think she rightfully belongs.
You know, I'm so thankful that Dr. Daniels resurrected her and brought her back to the university, and the fact that she was not embittered by being left out of the picture, and that she came with such a willing spirit. I think that says so much about her.
Juanita Johnson Bailey leads the Institute for Women's Studies at the University of Georgia. Johnson Bailey, who earned her doctorate at the university, has a personal story similar to Early's, only several decades later.
It was very lonely. Of course, I made friends, but when I would go outside of that area, no one would talk to me. And so a lot of the experiences that she had resonated with me. I couldn't believe that was 1962, that I experienced the same thing in 1994, but to a lesser degree.
Like many others on campus, including faculty, Johnson Bailey appreciates Early's accomplishments.
She is brilliant, kind, just a very generous person. The thing that impressed me so much about her when she spoke to our group was that she loved UGA and encouraged us to give back. And at that time, I was not a member of the Alumni Association, even though I had graduated from UGA years before. I graduated from UGA in 1994, and then went away to teach, and then came back, and I was not a member. And I thought, if Mrs. Early can be this kindly disposed towards UGA and this loving towards UGA, who am I to question that? I think Mrs. Early just sort of made me take a look at my own experiences here and realize that, as she put it, I got so much more than so many more positive experiences than I had negative experiences, and that I should not dwell on the negative, and that I was standing on her shoulders, and it was incumbent upon me to give back. And I have never deterred from that path. I'm a lifelong member of the Alumni Association. I give back, I recruit for UGA, but that's all because of Mrs. Early and her calling me out.
Her return to the campus and the Bulldog Nation was triumphant and redemptive, despite a nearly 4-decade gap.
But I think the proudest moment was probably when I came back to speak and was accepted in the year 2000, was accepted so warmly. Incidentally, it was at the law school, which I thought was rather ironical. But I was proud because I was proud to be part of something that was bigger than me, and to have others there supporting me and loving me and caring about the fact that I was there. It was just a great moment.
The revived affection for the red and black did not end there. Instead, it blossomed into a two-way love affair as Early became an exuberant cheerleader of the university community, which loved her back. It started with an ongoing series of conversations between Early and graduate students at UGA.
I asked them about their experiences and how they're doing. And I listened to many of them say, well, you know, I'm the only one in my field, in my department. And I often feel that I'm not understood or I'm mistreated. And I tell them, look, you came to get a degree. Get that steel in your back and don't give up, because this is what it's all about. You're going to meet the same thing in the world. Everybody's not going to like you, and you may not like them. But you can do this. But you must have that stick-to-itiveness, that perseverance that made you come here at the beginning.
Those meetings with the Graduate and Professional Scholars, GAPS, a student organization that supports the recruitment and retention of historically underrepresented graduate students, led to a lecture series in her name featuring distinguished educators, politicians, and civil rights icons.
Now, Mary Frances Early had used education to escape the terror and oppression of the South. She already had a degree from Clark University, or Clark College in Atlanta, and was studying music at the University of Michigan when Hunter and Holmes tried to desegregate UGA. The University of Michigan was known as a liberal campus. She may not have had it easy, but she was not met by mobs of students telling her to go home. Mary Early could have read about her friends' troubles here at this university, said a prayer, and just continued to study at the University of Michigan. But she decided to give up the comfort of her own life to get involved in the circumstances of others. I come here to say to you this afternoon, thank you. Thank you for paving the way for hundreds and thousands of others and for generations yet unborn. So we say thank you. God bless you.
Mary Frances Early is my story. And respectfully, I suggest that my story is also your story. We both grew up in those wretched days of legal racial discrimination that assigned us to the back of the bus, the colored water fountain, schools for colored children.
Dr. Early's admission and graduation from this university in 1962 was a major victory in the protracted struggle that ultimately shattered decades of de facto and de jure racial segregation in America. Dr. Early, thank you for all your courage, your intelligence, and your determination. Thank you for your unwavering faith, perseverance, and quiet dignity.
The university also established an endowed professorship in her name in the College of Education. In 2011, 50 years after Early enrolled, the University of Georgia appointed Dr. Cynthia Dillard as the inaugural Mary Frances Early Professor of Teacher Education. Mary Frances Early's trailblazing journey has inspired others to follow in her footsteps.
We had gone to a funeral, and then after the funeral we went to the Longhorn up here at Toco Hills to eat lunch. And we went in the door, this young woman was coming out and recognized her.
And I said, yes. And she was a UGA grad, and she went on and on about she knew me and blah, blah, blah. We went, and as we walked in, there was a young woman standing. She said, "You're Miss Early, aren't you?"
We had a little conversation, you know, and then we went in and ordered and were eating, and here came two others, a mother and a daughter.
We sat down, and there were two people sitting at booths in front of us, and they kept looking. I saw them, and then finally they got up and came, and it was a mother and daughter. Both of them were University of Georgia graduates, and they said the same thing. And I said, Betty, I can't believe in one day we have two people who know me.
She was living proof of why they had earned their spot at the University of Georgia, of why it was long overdue. And so I think it just opened it up for the citizens of Georgia. And they couldn't hide behind, they can't make it here anymore, they won't fit in. I think all of that was just erased with Mrs. Early.
Early is now an honored member of the UGA community, revered for her role in bringing positive change to the institution.
In January of 1961, she saw news accounts of Charlene Hunter and Hamilton Holmes, the first students to integrate the University of Georgia. She read of their bravery in the face of overt racism and hostility, and she decided to return to Georgia to contribute her own story to the cause of social justice.
Hank Klibanoff, who is a white professor at Emory, was a lecturer in 2013. After that, he invited me to have lunch with him because he actually did not know much about me. And that was in April. And he had once been the managing editor at the AJC. He talked with somebody, I don't know who. But in in May of 2013, I received an honorary Doctor of Laws degree. Why Doctor of Laws, I don't know, but I did. And the day before that degree was conferred, there was an article written by Bo Emerson of the AJC, and it was because of Hank Klibanoff. See, we, as I said, we stand on the shoulders of a lot of people. Many times we don't even know what's going on.
Shortly after I met her, one of the things that I found out about her is that she had intended to get her doctorate from the university. And so we invited her back to be a part of our program and had everything approved so that she could come and pursue her PhD here at the University of Georgia. And she said, you know, I have something different that I need to do for the university now. And so she put her own needs and her own dreams aside to be an ambassador for the university.
Today is a very special occasion for each of you. It's also significant for you and for the university because in addition to your degrees today, we confer tonight only the 79th honorary doctorate degree in the university's history. And we do so this evening upon a most deserving recipient, with Provost Moorhead and with Dr. Maurice Daniels, the Dean of the School of Social Work, who has played an important role in helping write about the significant impact of Mary Frances Early on the University of Georgia and on education in the great state of Georgia. It's okay. Just remain standing for a moment. Mary Frances Early, in recognition and appreciation of your service and enduring contributions to this great university, to the state of Georgia, and to this nation, by the authority vested in me as President of the University of Georgia by the Board of Regents of the University System of Georgia, I now have the privilege of conferring upon you the honorary Doctor of Laws degree with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereto appertaining. Congratulations.
I thought Miss Early must have been one hell of a person, one hell of a woman to have achieved that. And I'm sure during the 60s, I can't imagine some of the stuff she must have faced as she was doing that.
We need to tell the story about how a lady who happened to be, by accident of birth, an African American, and how she succeeded against the odds. There is no telling what she could have done but for segregation and discrimination. There's no telling. Because whatever she accomplished within the confines of America, as it was at the time she was coming up, she could have done more. But you had so many opportunities that were blocked off just because she had the accident of birth of being born African American.
But even decades after earning her degrees and place in history, Early did not flinch when addressing the legacy of those times.
I was very aware that there were some who felt that we were going too fast, that we needed to let 2 students go through and then, take it just very gradually. And I guess that at all points in our lives, there are people who have varying opinions about how fast the pace should be. But in terms of desegregation, those of us who were, so to speak, on the front line felt that you needed to move as fast and as far as you could because you won't get there. I mean, we're not there yet.
But this woman who did not seek the spotlight exhibited courage and tenacity that helped change the course of history at the University of Georgia.
I think that women have just been the silent heroines. They've been the people behind the powerful forces that we see. There were women behind Martin Luther King. There were just women always there in the movement. When you look at the women who were behind the marches, who organized them, they're just sort of left out of history. Their stories haven't been told. And I think that's why it's so important to know who Mrs. Early is and who she was as an integral part of the movement.
She has a strong faith that perceptions about her alma mater will change for the better.
My belief, and some people would guffaw at this, is that God is still in charge. And through us, we have to be His hands, His feet. We have to activate ourselves and take on the responsibility to help make this world the kind of place it can be, and particularly this nation.
Lord,